my name is Ottmar Deutzer. I'm from UNITAR Cycle. Yeah, we have this pilot project in Tanzania about, in the end, say the better control of e-waste and used electrical equipment coming into the country. Some background then on the project itself. Well, I think it's not always that a project happens because everything is bad. It needs to be improved. So I think that this project has one a bright side, which we would like to work on. And there are a lot of used imports of used electrical equipment imported into Tanzania, of course, like the usual picture from coming from higher income countries. In case of Tanzania, not only or not primarily even from the EU, we don't know yet, but also from the rich Arabian countries, which are not so far from Tanzania. And what we learned is that Tanzania welcomes these imports because the government says, well, it allows affordable access to EEE for people who otherwise might not be in the position to buy such equipment new, or maybe they could buy it, but sometimes with this used equipment has a higher quality than, for example, very cheap new equipment, which is prone to fail very soon. As an important background, is also Tanzania is party to the Basel Convention, whose intention is to control not the used equipment, but at least control the imports or illegal imports of e-waste into countries. Yeah, this is the good side, but of course, like always, where there's light, there's shadow. There's a dark side to it that some or used such imports of UEEE are often mixed with e-waste, and the government here is not amused about this part of the story. Tanzania does not really know how much and what kind of equipment and in which functionality status is imported into the country. This would be a burden on a future EPR system, which Tanzania would like to establish. So the EE producers in the country which are registered are not amused, of course, if then they also would have to pay for all the legal or illegally imported e-waste and used electrical equipment. As a matter of fact, of course, new EEE at end of life puts a high burden on the environment and the health of Tanzanians. But at least before there was a useful lifetime, if we import e-waste, then the useful life is very short, maybe limited to some components which can be reused. Otherwise, but the burdens are then the same and apply pretty shortly after import. What is an issue is that inspectors cannot differentiate used electrical equipment from e-waste at the point of import, so they don't have. So it's not established at all, even to control this income. Not meaning that there are no controls, but they just do an assessment of what is in the container, and there is no further testing or whatsoever. And then another issue is once even the Tanzanians reported us about containers with e-waste identified, nevertheless, and which is piling up sometimes then in the port and remains there for years, and so it's not clear then what should happen to this. So what do we want to do then with this project? To bring it to short terms, of course, we want to bring light to the dark side, so solve the problems which I just addressed. But at the same time, we would also like to maintain the light on the bright side. So it is not the solution which the Tanzanian government aspires to say, okay, because we don't want the e-waste, we can't stop completely imports of used electrical equipment. So this is not the intention. The intended start of this project was already in December 2020. The actual start, however, was in January 2022. So you see this is a considerable delay so it took a very long time until the right person was identified in Tanzania to sign the contract, and then the president passed away, and so there were a lot of hurdles, and this was a lot of stress on us, but also on GIZ in this case, because everybody has to justify the money which is spent, and we felt really a bit desperate about the situation, and even considered to cancel the project because we thought, okay, well, it's never coming to a good end. What happened then? It was finally signed, and somehow then it was decided in the discussion with all involved parties that we give it a try. Partners in the project, now it's the end date, the not yet official end date. The official end date is end of September, but because of the short time available and further delays or the normal flow of things in Tanzania, it takes a bit longer, and so now we can have to finalize until end of October. Partners are UNITAR, so Cycle, plus the National Environmental Management Council. This is a kind of EPA in Tanzania, and the World Resources Forum in Switzerland, with the Vice President's Office, VPO, which is the superior authority also of NEMC, plus the Eastern African Communication Organization. What is the approach? Well, we don't have to bring the light to the right place. There is already something in place, which is called the Basel Convention Technical Guidelines, or Guideline on Transboundary Movements of EEE and waste, with a focus on specifically differentiating between or discriminating waste and non-waste. So this is in principle what we need here as one component of the project, and this is what should be implemented in Tanzania. To avoid misunderstanding, the Basel Convention is ratified and implemented in the country. So, but what is missing is now the respective control mechanisms. And this is what we want to establish here, not for all waste, but for e-waste. So this has several aspects. Of course, it's the institutional implementation. So it must be clarified really who is responsible for what and how. So it's the institutional implementation. So who actually does the checks in the port? Is it the customs or is it any other authority? Practical implementation. Now, there are certain e-waste criteria mentioned in the BCG, which need to be applied. Then there's not a one-by-one takeover of the BCG, but Tanzania has some own priorities and things that wishes to deviate, or some issues in this Basel Convention guideline are left open or not so clear, and decisions need to be taken. So all these things shall be transferred into then the national technical guideline, which would then be the Tanzanian version of this BCG, of this technical guideline. And then it's once this lot of effort is done, then it would of course be useful if this could be applied somewhere else, or be of further use of a kind of a modified reuse in other EACO member states, which is then another objective of this thing, and other approach also to not only prevent illegal imports of e-waste into Tanzania, but also into the larger region. There's a second component to it. I said that Tanzania does not know how much is coming in, what kind of equipment is actually coming in which functional status it is, where it comes from, and so on. So this is what we want to clarify also. So on this behalf, we set up, we do inspections in the port, more as a statistical exercise. This is not necessarily part then of the routine controls, which the Tanzanian authorities will conduct later on as a routine control, hopefully, even though they might take over some of these elements. So there's inspection in the port, checking, so what is in the container, how much is it, how is it declared, how, in which functional status is it, where does it come from? So all these questions can be clarified in this inspection. Also comparing declaration and what is actually found in the container. And we also want to evaluate the import documents, which is, however, as we learned, a very difficult thing. We come back to this. So this is the approach. What has happened so far? As you already realized, for a long time, nothing has happened. And then we had to speed up things. We started more or less in January, trying to find out as much as possible about the situation. But it proved to be difficult. So in the end, we did, as foreseen in the plan, just at an earlier stage already, we did a national workshop in April of this year. It was 2 days in Dar es Salaam, and this was dedicated to more to the authorities involved in the whole thing. So we tried to involve the working level officers. We tried to avoid the political staff because we wanted to deal with the people who work on the ground, who are responsible for the whole thing, actually. And we also had invited representatives of the districts of Dar es Salaam and more or less from there, who suffer from the consequences of such imports. A lot of them come from Zanzibar and are landed or off-boarded then somewhere along the coast, which is why they should have been involved in this as well. And of course, the project partners, the European ones and the African ones were also on site, including GIZ. So what did we do there? I mean, the fact that the Basel Convention is ratified and even implemented in national legislation does not mean that people actually know what it is. So we try to bring everybody on the same level about the basic intentions of the Basel Convention and also of these guidelines and how this is related to the Tanzanian regulations. We did this, of course, with the help of our Tanzanian partners who are the specialists in these fields. And then what we also did is we practiced the distinction of UEE and e-waste with the audience. We did this with slides, identifying some pictures, just to give, say, after telling people the criteria, it's maybe we thought it was good also to show them what this could mean in practice and how easy or difficult it was. Then we discussed and decided with Tanzanian authorities also about the individual e-waste criteria, whether and how they should be adapted, should have to be adapted to the Tanzanian context. And then, also discuss and decide the institutional responsibilities. So real work on the ground, who does what, in which case. And we prepared a draft checklist. You can imagine you cannot take this Basel Convention guideline and give it to an inspector and tell him, please just now go and and do the inspections in the port. This is not practicable because it's a legal text in the end still, or a guideline, which is similar like a legal text in style and writing and also in the structure. So it's not it's not applicable as it is. So we try to operationalize this, preparing such a draft and discussing it with them and checking it also the next day, we will see. And then we also did one exercise. We were surprised when we were preparing the workshop. We thought there must be tons of materials for how to do functionality tests of used equipment. And this is not wrong. But what we realized is that almost all of this is more for exporters to do functionality tests, more like for certification, rather than doing inspections in a port. So this was not appropriate. So you cannot do a full functionality test on a fridge, for example, in an inspection environment. You can maybe open the door, see whether the light goes on and whether the compressor starts. If you set the thermostat to a lower temperature than the ambient temperature. Yeah, but then this is more or less, maybe you can keep it running for a while and then see whether it cools actually. But then it's the question whether you have still then the time to wait until maybe the compressor switches off again because the targeted temperature is achieved. So this may be more complicated, and the same applies to a lot of other equipment. So we try to develop some basic functionality tests with the audience. We had some examples which we found in literature, and then we used those to really, simply tell the people, okay, now let's use reason and simply do it. If there is no alternative, a basic functionality test, even if it's incomplete and non-perfect, is still better than doing nothing and having nothing at hand. Yeah, and then of course there was also the initial steps for developing of this technical of this transposition of the BCG into the Tanzanian technical guideline, or the national one. Then these 2 days were followed by a training, and this time we had in principle the same people like for the first workshop, but now including inspectors really working on the ground at ports and airports and borders to the neighboring countries. So what we did is we did in principle the same program. However, of course, the legal part was reduced, and we conveyed the decisions taken in the workshop before. So basic decisions on related to how the criteria, the e-waste criteria should be applied. And we did then the same thing again with the inspectors, practicing the used equipment, e-waste discrimination criteria with the audience. But this time we did it with slides, and we had asked the people. It was a 2 days workshop. So on the first day, we had asked them, please, if you have any used equipment or e-waste at home, bring it to the site next day. We also asked in our hotel, and they also provided us with some older equipment. And then, we did this and asked people to really practice. We had developed the draft checklist already, and with this, they went through and in groups, and then gave us their opinion whether this and that is now e-waste or whether it's used equipment, and why or why not. And then this was also the decision was discussed with the others. So it was a quite exciting exercise. And we did then the same again also with the functionality tests. We developed a few further or others for simple equipment also. Just to give you an impression of this Basel Convention guideline, interestingly, it has some, say, entry points where you start when you do an inspection. But this is now more on the documentation side. So you check the documentation and you see, first of all, okay, is the first step is, is this transport considered e-waste or waste in any involved country, meaning either in Tanzania or in the country of export, or in the country of where it passes through, of transfer. If this is the case, then it would already be considered as waste. This is probably for the maybe not so important for the Tanzanians in this context. But the point is then, of course, one entry point is then, okay, if you have this such an import, you look at the declaration. Is it declared for direct reuse or extended use, or is it not? So the first question we already discussed. Then if you find the second, it's declared for direct reuse, then you check, if this is the case, is the required documentation available? Yes. Is it properly packaged? Yes. And then you could assume that according to at least the paper documents, it's not e-waste. You can, of course, still, and it's advisable to do some checks. But these should be attached in this case, because otherwise it would also be e-waste. If this is unknown, there's still a second possibility why this could still be used equipment if it's designed for or imported for failure analysis and repair or refurbishment for reuse, then not for recycling or any other. And then this would also be a legal and wanted import. If this is not the case, then it's e-waste. If this is the case, then it's, of course, in this context, very important that all the obligatory documentation is available. If this is meaning, okay, who is the one who is receiving, who is, does this company or person have the ability to do the repair, and who takes care of the equipment, and so tracking is also an issue, and so on. So if this is the case, then you check, this now we come to some checks. Properly packaged, this is nothing you can see from the document, but this already shows a lot whether it's properly packaged or not. If this is the case, yes, and then it's advisable maybe to also do some more functionality checks, at least when it's reuse equipment. If this is not the case, if the documents are not available, then I think it's wise to do it as, say it's e-waste. Now this sounds somehow clear, and we have here two main entry points. What can then be used equipment? However, in practice, this here is at least not so very relevant, we learned. So what is more relevant are other import ways or modes. So here, this is part of our checklist, which we created, and this has different entry points. So the two ones which we discussed before now were A and B here, but then you see that there are others. So what happens quite often is that equipment simply comes, it's a whole container containing many things, mixed container, and declared as personal effects or household goods. And very often, we experienced this also in another project in Nigeria. Very often, in the end, this is used UEE, and sometimes mixed with waste. Then it can also be that it's none of the above, but that it comes as a donation. This seems to be very, very common in Tanzania, and it seems that this is then not always only charity, but also maybe for saving money in the for the disposal of such equipment. So it was decided that such donations should be treated like other imports, including all the inspection routines, and not simply left to enter the country. Then there's, of course, equipment designed for disposal or recycling. This is clear, of course, that this is e-waste, doesn't need a further check. Yeah, and then there is still other ways of imports which we could not really name, but one thing is that, for example, the whole equipment comes without a declaration. What happens, for example, that somehow used equipment and e-waste enter the country via Zanzibar, which is the island, which is part of the of Tanzania, and then it's unpacked, it's released from the containers, and then people bring it via boat to either an official port on the mainland Tanzania, or there's a long coastline where they then discharge this, and thus like this it enters the country. And so this should also be controlled stronger than it used to be, because a lot of things come into the country on this route. Yeah, and then to give you an idea about what the inspection criteria are, so these are the criteria you find in this guideline. So it's if the price paid for the equipment is much lower than expected for fully functional reuse equipment. Yeah, good equipment, even if used, should have its price. So meaning you would have to show an invoice as an importer and to see how much you paid for it. Then if it's incomplete, so meaning essential parts missing, then it's e-waste. There is in theory clear, in practice not. No cable is e-waste. This is what was decided in Tanzania. So this sometimes challenged decision or stipulation was adopted. This is what the government wants. So if it comes without a cable, it's considered as essential parts missing and should not be allowed. It's e-waste. If it shows a defect, so that the core functions are not cannot be provided, it's also e-waste. If it shows clear physical damage which impair functionality, safety,
basically only produced small,
cannot be repaired at reasonable cost, it's e-waste. If it's not properly packaged, it's e-waste. If it's particularly worn out or damaged, and so that nobody wants to buy it, even though it may still be fully functional, it's e-waste. If there is no regular reuse market for several reasons, we will see, it's e-waste. And then if the equipment contains a hazardous component or substance, so that it has to be disposed of, or that the import is prohibited, for example, by specific multilateral environmental agreements like the Stockholm Convention, Montreal Protocol, or whatsoever. So this is, in principle, I think pretty clear. One thing, so this first criterion here about the price paid for the equipment was decided that this is not relevant. Why not? As I said, this official entry points which the BCG defines are not relevant really for, to a large degree, are not relevant for Tanzania. But these other issues like imports in containers declared as personal effects are. And very often this equipment is simply collected from the curbside in higher income countries or handed over by households to companies which then export it. And the price paid then is sometimes zero, and still the equipment can be useful. So this is why the Tanzanian government said, okay, in this case, well, maybe this is not really so very relevant. Yeah, and now this is very theoretical. I think we do now a small exercise just to give you some examples how easy or maybe complicated the whole thing can be. Decide yourself. A DY exercise. I ask you simply who has an idea to simply speak up. And I think we are not so many, and as you still be able maybe then to single out the person who said something. We don't have a specific price for being right, so it's just for the sake of the exercise. So don't be shy. It's interesting simply to hear what you think. So this here, would you say this is used equipment or e-waste? Any opinions? The equipment should be functional in its core functions at least.
So this is Carla speaking from the Secretariat of the Basel Convention.
Ah, okay.
So I think
So
it's e-waste.
Why?
Because missing parts. And we don't,
But
I mean, we don't have enough information, but there are missing parts. We don't know if it's functioning or not. So it's kind of not packaged. There are several issues here now.
Yeah. So let's assume it would be functional and otherwise undamaged. Of course, you're right. It's not properly packaged. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, okay, let's proceed. I mean, what you see, of course, the speaker cover is missing, and I would assume that even then, if it's still functional, it's maybe a safety issue. If you see the coil is exposed and you can have current voltage on this. Concerning the packaging, yeah, Carla, you are right. There's not enough information, but let's assume this was properly packaged to exclude this criterion. Yeah, but I think there is another issue. Who do you think would buy such a CRT TV? Would you do it, even if you had small money only?
I think the attendees here know, no?
Yeah, and I think the same applies in
To the
Tanzania.
colleagues in Tanzania.
Nobody wants to have such a TV in Tanzania. So there is a lot. There's better products available on the market. Flat panel displays, modern technology. So what we can say here, it shows physical damages that might at least impair safety, I would say. And it's an outdated technology which nobody wants to buy. So then it cannot be marketed. So it's e-waste, clearly. So next one. It's a nice Siemens German quality. Great vacuum cleaner. You're the inspectors. Would you let it pass or reject? Okay, you're bad inspectors. You have no opinion. So you let it pass.
No.
Is this correct?
No, we don't.
You don't? Okay, why not?
Well, there are other people who'd like to hear other people.
Not be happy. Pardon?
It would be nice to hear from other people too. So what do they think?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think you are the only good inspector.
I think Ralf Nader raised his hand.
Yes,
yeah, please speak up.
I think so. I mean, there's at least the suction pipe missing. So if that's the whole vacuum cleaner, then there are definitely parts missing. So which doesn't make it complete. And right now, I can't see the cable condition on the other side. Actually, I would need to test that. So if it's actually functional.
Okay. So you just won a contract with the Tanzanian Port Authority. You can do inspections there. Great, congratulations. So it's right, it is e-waste, it's incomplete. So essential parts are missing. We don't know about the cable, good observation, but we see that the hose is missing. So this is clearly e-waste. Now about this, what do you think? Any opinion? Or what would you look at in this case besides, let's assume it's functional? No opinion?
I think for 20 euros, I would take it.
You would take it, okay, good.
So, but first I want to do again a functional test, but at least sewing machines have a certain value no matter what age they actually have, because there's a certain innovation in it and it's still useful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, this is exactly the critical question here is, let's say it's functional, but is it technically outdated? You said they always have a value. This could be, yeah, could be. The question is whether it has a value in the country and has a market. I don't know how exactly this can be dealt with. So I think in this case, We would need more background information. The Tanzanians couldn't tell either. So you see, it's not always so easy. Sometimes there are gray areas or where you would have to have more knowledge in such a situation. And the question is then how you make this available then if you find something like this in a container, even if it's properly packaged and so on. Next one. Fantastic. I think it's, I don't know, is it Liebherr or? Who would let it pass or who would not let it pass? Any opinions?
We would need more information, isn't it?
About
just
what?
looking at it, we don't know enough. Again,
So what would
it's
you
a
check?
fridge or it's a freezer. What you already said, is there a market for used equipment as such? I suppose yes, this is a commodity for many households. If it's a fridge, if it's a freezer, perhaps less. But again, where is the cable? What is the plug? Is it functioning or not? So we would need a bit more, no?
Yes, we would maybe need more, but at least it looks good.
It looks in
let's
good
assume
state.
the cable is there. And I mean, what you said, Carla, is all applicable. And then there is another crucial aspect. You should look at the compressor. And in this case, if you look here, you see R12. And R12 should not be exported and not be imported because it's some of the banned by the Montreal Protocol of some of the banned CFCs. So here, this is something you must be careful, take a look really at what you find here. So this is an import of UE of an electrical equipment which contains hazardous substances or is banned by international multilateral environmental agreements. So almost lost this wonderful stove. Let's say this has a cable, not to make it too easy. It's a Bosch, so let's.
Made in Germany.
Made in Germany,
Perhaps.
for sure.
I'll show my face once at least, no, guys, so that we know each other.
Yes. So, what do you think?
Yes, I would love to have that.
You would love to have that. Okay. Any other opinions? As I said, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just about asking the right questions. Okay. It seems there are no opinions. Yeah, Carla, what you said, I agree. It looks great. It seems to be a reasonable brand also, good reputation, it's clean and everything. The core question in this context is, whether electrical stoves
yes.
have a market in the country, like in Tanzania. If yes, it could be considered UEE. So the question here in this context is, do Tanzanians cook with electricity or gas? And in many of these countries, people do not use electricity because this is expensive and there are a lot of power shortages. So it's not very reliable. So they use gas. And in such a case, this is e-waste. So you cannot do anything with this besides dismantling it and making some money with the metals. So that's a tricky thing sometimes. What I wanted to show you is that you need already a lot of background also. You cannot only do this with learning the criteria by heart, but you really need some really also insights into the conditions of the country. So a last one is this one here. What is this? E-waste or who has something like this in the office and still uses it?
Collector's item.
Pardon?
It's a museum
Collector's item.
Yeah, collector's item, an Apple.
Why is it a collector's item? It's because it's from Apple.
It's an Apple old computer. Don't know which model, but based on soft disks.
There might be a niche market for really nerds who want to do that, who wants to use that and put it somewhere. So
I think you are on the right track. You have a good nose, but in this case, you would have better had an even bigger nose, because I think this is the first Macintosh computer from 1984. And as far as I know, there are only 2 or 3 samples of this left worldwide. So if you find something like this, you can sell it for a lot of money to, collectors, as it was already mentioned. So you were on the right track. I don't know whether you find something like this, but it can happen from time to time that there are reports about famous paintings of famous painters being found somewhere. So this could also happen in principle in such a situation. So this is just a fancy example. Yeah, so what we do now is we are in the pilot testing phase. So the issue is that the government would like to practice the whole thing, the checklist and the criteria, and how they can be applied, what specific problems the inspectors experience, what kind of questions arise in the Tanzanian context, which are still not yet answered, how exactly things are implemented, whether this is practicable, whether it can be integrated into the daily routines, and so on and so on, and also how institutions can cooperate or maybe not. So that's an important part of the story. This was originally planned for 2 months, but because of this considerable delay, we had to really condense this whole thing. In parallel, then, with a pilot test with these inspections, we asked the inspectors to collect data about volumes, types, functionality, origin of UEE and e-waste imports. This is one part of the statistical exercise, which we want to do to give insights into these questions. As what is quite a bit difficult is that we also want to check the importation documents, something we could do in Nigeria in such a similar exercise. But in Tanzania, nobody seems to know where the shipping manifests are actually. They are part of every import, but the responsible or the potential responsibles were pointing with fingers at each other, each of them claiming that the others should have it. But so far, we were not yet very successful to identify really where this information is available. So we still try, but not sure whether they somehow may come up, plop up someday.
Am I allowed to ask a question in that context? Concerning the investigation and automatizing the investigations, do you use visual recognition like a literati tool and hack a literati tool to identify items, do certain and create a visual database online which is backed up by certain feedback loops which already has certain answers? If it has been trained once, if you know that this is an out of scope article, then you already get it the next time when you find it already a feedback loop and saying, actually, that is already e-waste. So there's no second guess because it has been already tested and proved one time.
I think this is a wonderful idea for the next stage. For the time being, I think we are happy if we can at least get this whole exercise started. So a very good idea, but not yet in this part of the project. So maybe a next stage.
Because I'm just coming from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste meeting on the other side, and there's a durable products group, and one topic is of course also e-waste in that area, and finding the data and understanding how much trade is happening and knowing that the trade, so really squaring a bit the circle there of different needs that might be quite interesting at a certain point in time.
I agree, but it would have also be tested whether and how far it's really helpful. Sometimes things that seem to be obvious. It's sometimes then in practice it's not, but it's for sure an idea really to have a look at this and think about and simply maybe do a pilot test at a later stage with this as well.
Yeah.
So the current status of the tests, however, is that there's again been a long delay until everything happened, and we were told that it starts this week. So let's be optimistic. So now it can run only until end of first week in October, or maybe a little bit longer, because then we have to also evaluate this, because then we have an international workshop also where we want to introduce and review the results of the whole exercise, discuss the further rollout in Tanzania and also in EACO countries, which are like Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. And we want to have participants, like the ones before, but this time we want to have also someone from Impel, and we have one expert from there. And we are quite happy. This is an important thing. So what the final activities are, and we in the workshop is to explain the customs routines practiced in the EU. We were, by the participants, especially on this training, with the inspectors, we were asked, so why do you expect us now to do your job? Why do you train us and not your inspectors? Why do we still receive this? And I think that this is a reasonable question. And not so easy to answer. The answer is for sure not that there are no checks and controls, but I think it's good to have this expert from Impel. He is or did work as an inspector for many years and a very experienced person, and we want him to explain how this happens and how the inspections happen and how it happens then that still e-waste arrives in Tanzania. So I think this is psychologically an important point I think in the end, the whole problem cannot only be solved by cooperation, not by finger pointing, but it's also, I think, clear probably that we have to do also more and not only focus on others to do their job. Then, of course, we want to review and finalize the checklist, and then also review and finalize the statistical data collection and evaluate it then after the workshop to bring it into the final shape. Yes, and of course, also we want to review and finalize then this national technical guideline reflecting the outcomes of the whole exercise, the decisions, including also then the checklists and tests in annexes. And writing down the institutional roles and responsibilities in the document. Observations to date, before we close, we realized that there is a very high hesitance and a kind of a psychological barrier to inspect and test UEE waste. It seemed to us that people think this is really a very complicated thing, and so only something maybe which at best you leave it to a Nobel Prize laureate to do the job. There is also a lot of institutional and constitutional issues around it. The various representatives of the authorities always highlighted that they had no budget, and so there were a lot of budgetary reservations against corporations. NPA, or TPA, the Tanzanian Port Authority, said, we asked them, you scan every container. Maybe you can flag already to the inspectors if you identify containers which are not officially declared as electrical equipment and still contain such equipment. And they said, of course, if they are told to do so, they do. But in the end, we realized, no, they don't want, because they have the feeling they just have to take over additional responsibilities and without additional budget. And this is, of course, critical because the number of inspectors is limited. And if you're in Dar es Salaam and you go, for example, to the city beach, it's Coco Beach, It's very nice. I don't know whether it's advisable to go swimming, but at least the surrounding is very nice. But you see a lot of ships waiting to be cleared. So if you ask the inspectors now, you do some additional things, they are of course not happy. So that's a real issue. Yeah. So, but this is something which the Tanzanians have to sort out. We cannot do this for them. The autonomy, the constitutional issues were a big surprise to us. We are working with VPO, the Vice President's office, and what we did not know is that this office in import and customs issues has no authority in Zanzibar. Zanzibar is in this sense autonomous, and to our surprise, our partners in Tanzania were not even aware of this. And the bad part of this is that most used electrical equipment, and with that e-waste, is imported via Zanzibar, because the fees are lower there. This is, of course, a big flaw. So we try to, and we could not change this. We could have changed this if we had a regular kickoff at the beginning of maybe January 2020, but in April 2022, this was no longer possible to fix this. So now we urge the Tanzanian partners to bring inspectors from Tanzania or from Zanzibar also to the international workshop, so that we can try to involve them, and then hopefully can develop some dynamics so that they become part of the story. I already mentioned testing. Most tests are not made for inspection situations, but for export situations, for certifications, not readily available. Another issue is that on site there is no access to electricity. This seems to be a common problem because, it's for the routine inspections, it's not needed. We experienced the same in Nigeria. So we have to work probably with a compressor, and let's see whether our Tanzanian partners actually do this. And then, of course, as you might have already heard out, it is a cultural experience also for us. In the end, I would bring it to the conclusion that it's good to follow and the local flow with trust and critical belief and patience. We realized, okay, things happen, not always from itself. You need to push, but then we were very surprised in April after all this chaos and a lot of communication problems and absence, no shows, actual fixes, and so on and so on. We were very surprised that the workshop then was organized and it worked well. And also, the people we dealt with, they were knowledgeable. It's not that they were, I don't know, and committed also. So this is something which after this long, difficult start, we had really not expected. And that was a really positive surprise. And it was very constructive also for the environment. So that was very good and compensated for a lot of the other hassles. And this is why we still hope that now, despite of all this, we will initiate something in the country, which is hopefully of durable value for the country.